It's a damn good wormhole. These are the words of Wu Tang, who helped us to locate an uninhabited Class 2 wormhole system that our corporation, Interstellar Booty Hunters, could use as a new base. Our first major operation in the wormhole system of J225805 was the utter destruction of the orbital customs offices in the system, and the deployment of our own. In EVE, the only real interaction with planets is the remote operation of surface mining installations and factories, the goods from which are then transported to an orbital customs office where the valuable resources are then picked up by your ship. Of course, whoever controls the player-owned customs offices, which we call POCOs for short, gets to set a tax on those planet resources as they are collected. We determined that whoever owned these particular customs offices were not a threat, and so we opted to blow them up and install our own so that we could collect our planet materials with no customs tax. Although these structure bashes can be a long and grueling affair, it was a bonding experience for us. We began building our POS, or player-owned station, in the system. You see, in wormhole systems there are no NPC space stations to dock at, so players must put up their own, and at that time there were no citadels like today. Player-owned stations consisted of a tower structure at its core, which generated a giant force field controlled by the owners. All station modules such as factories, ore processing, research labs, storage bins, and station weapons were anchored around the tower in space, and yet not connected. Weird, right? I will simply call this system a wormhole, even though technically it's only a star system that is reached via wormholes. J225805 always had at least 2 wormholes that changed every day. The one wormhole would always exit into low-sec, and another to a higher class of wormhole. This would mean that every day the wormhole could exit to any number of random, maybe dangerous locations throughout EVE, and provide us with random adventures based on where it exited. This was the great thing about wormhole life. At one point the wormhole exited into a low-sec system in the Iridia region. On the other side, hundreds of other players from Test Alliance Please Ignore infested the system called Soliara, one of my old stomping grounds for low-sec exploration. Test is one of the biggest null-sec alliances in EVE, but to our surprise, they were in low-sec. And why? And more importantly, with those numbers, they could all come through the wormhole and wreak havoc on our base if they had the will. What we learned is that Test had just been defeated by Goonswarm and the Imperium in the Great Fountain War, one of EVE's biggest wars. Soliara had become their temporary fallback base after this great defeat. Although this raised the tension for us at the thought of hundreds of test pilots getting into our wormhole, conversations with the local pirates revealed that just because a group has numbers, it doesn't make them competent. They had been hunting and killing the test pilots with great gusto. However, we decided not to tempt fate. A wormhole becomes more unstable the more massive ships use it, and then usually can collapse early altogether. Deliberately destabilizing a wormhole by running massive ships through it is called rolling the wormhole. So we collapsed the wormhole to Iridia on a quiet night using this method, and gladly let links to calmer parts of space form. Soon, however, my own sense of buyer's remorse about the wormhole set in. Veteran wormhole inhabitants would always brag to us about tales of fortune in these wormholes. We found no such fortunes in our Class 2 wormhole. We could clearly make far more ISK and good old K-space with exploration and loot hunting. Less and less people in our corp would stay in the wormhole. Instead, the best explorers in our corp would parcel out exploration areas of known space for themselves and coordinate their use. One player may claim a cluster of systems in an isolated part of high-sec where there was less competition, and another like myself would find loot in quiet low-sec pockets. J225805 began to look like a large house where all the children had gone, especially for the recruits or friends that Wu-Tang brought in. I would sometimes observe them waiting in the wormhole for hours, totally dependent on others for any kind of content or movement. Such a lonely cave for those who were not self-starters and needed the company of others. And this led to one of the things that made Booty Hunters so unique, and yet so weird. The tensions began to rise when Wu-Tang complained about how none of the hardcore explorers were team players. But it was more than that. Even in the wormhole, when I was not around, there were drunken arguments and fights between Wu-Tang and some who were unsuccessfully living in J225805. Three sort of separate cliques began to form in our corp. There were those that messed around in the wormhole with Wu-Tang. There were those that were in the middle and would follow me into low-sec and somewhat risky but rewarding exploration hunts. And there were those who farmed high-sec, where it was nice and safe for exploration loot. The latter group were polite and friendly, however, they would rarely, if ever, come onto voice comms and talk, much less participate in any kind of fleet operation. At this point, I think it's important to say that Interstellar Booty Hunters at present looks nothing like this. Although we are now a dedicated PvP Corp, one thing that remains the same as it did back then, and that is that those who thrive are still the self-starters, not the ones who need constant hand-holding, who are dependent on others for content. These divisions came to a fiery head one evening. I rallied a group of us together to go on a low-sec exploration hunt, and I twisted Wu-Tang's arm to go with us. He reluctantly came along and complained about the price and hassle of purchasing a new Ishtar assault cruiser, although this surprised me, since he was a veteran exploration pilot like the rest of us. He should have been able to afford one. Well, we set out. However, that night the hunters were the hunted, and the local pirates managed to catch Wu-Tang in a drunken stupor while the rest of us were able to escape. Wu-Tang's Ishtar was mercilessly destroyed. The awkward silence that followed prompted me to help Wu out by giving him money that covered about half of his pricey ship loss. The response I immediately got was, "That's it?" An argument escalated, tempers flared. I took it to a different room in our voice comms and proceeded to chew Wu-Tang's ungrateful ass out. But Sneaky Wu was an admin in our voice comms, so while I was ripping him a new asshole, he moved me back up to the main voice channel where my corp mates were, without me knowing it, and they got to witness my angry rant. Well, I think we were both embarrassed, and we called it a night. The next day we made amends, although I began to see the flaws in our corp. There was too much division about what we were supposed to be, and no unity, and there were certain people who simply wouldn't allow any kind of unity. Over time, I began to more selectively invite people onto my fleets, and even run those fleets in semi-secret. Slowly but surely, without anyone making content for them, the deadweight members in our corp passed into inactivity, and they were eventually removed, while the more positive members were promoted and given some focus. Even the more risk-averse high-sec farmers who rarely fleeted were assured that they could stay in the corp as long as they were drama-free and active. Even Wu-Tang decided that he wanted to go back to Nullsec and team up with his old friends in Space Monkeys Alliance, and left us on amicable terms. And then the real culture of booty began to form. Some of it remains to this day. We became a superstitious lot. Our language was often about mojo and loot gods. The friendly competition of finding good loot meant our mojo was good. This led to even more coordination, more concentration, and the ability to train newcomers to find more wealth than they would have thought possible. And then the inevitable happened. Another griefing corp by the name of Heartless Bastards, this time one a bit smaller than ours, decided to declare war on us. Those of you who aren't familiar with wars in EVE Online, you might want to take a look at my previous video about a war between Interstellar Booty Hunters, which was us, and another corp called Booty Hunters. But many of the more risk-averse members of our corp were immediately nervous and would go on about this damned high-sec war deck, and some considered leaving while the war went on. After all, they could not have their precious high-sec loot hunting interrupted. With every crisis, there is an opportunity, and this war would prove very useful to me. I would not miss out on this chance to show our corp that there is no need to be afraid if we work together. The war targets, which were not many, seemed to be harassing some of us who used the A2 system as an exploration outpost, especially on the station. I told those more nervous members that all we needed to do is simply bait the war target into attacking someone near the station, while the rest of us, staying out of view, would jump the Stargate nearest the station, warp in, and rescue our bait ship while destroying the war target. Bait is one of the oldest tricks in the book in Eve, but doing it well takes a while to learn, and it wouldn't be the last time we would use it. But this time our war targets took the bait. By engaging a Capsuleer, he would be unable to dock at the station until he stopped fighting for a full minute. Station Games 101. We warped in with our fleet and destroyed the Ferox battlecruiser with no problems. This revealed them to be typical griefers, unskilled at real PvP, but looking for easy kills from what seemed like a group of non-violent explorers. Many of our members who had never had a PvP kill were over the moon with enthusiasm. Although the war targets elected to hide rather than engage us further, some of us were eager to have some more PvP content. Wu-Tang also took notice of our growth and ability to defend ourselves. I decided enough time had passed that if he wanted to return he could, and so he did, but I would no longer be giving him the Vice CEO level of access. Although I will say again that Interstellar Bounty Hunters is no longer an exploration corp, and today there are certainly large and successful exploration corps such as the Eve Scout Enclave, but at that time, our corp was so healthy that we could say with confidence we were the best exploration corp in Eve. The flow into the future always changes things. The shift to more PvP content began to crystallize into a plan to attack our first rivals, the ones that said we stole their name, Booty Hunters. In the next episode, we will cover the transition from pure exploration to aggressive exploration. And was our corp really PvPers, or just wannabes who would crumble in a truly intense situation? You shall see. Those of you who are asking about my progress on the Chimera Star Destroyer versus the Daedalus, yes, that project is still on, and I will post progress in the community tab. And those of you looking for a small gang PvP corp in Eve, Interstellar Booty Hunters is recruiting. At the moment, we will take you if you have 5 million skill points, and if you're willing to lose a ship without it breaking your will to dust yourself off, learn from the experience, and try again. Until next time, space friends. At one point, the wormhole exited into a low-sec system in the Iridia retake. Exited into a low-sec system in the Iridia retake. Retake. There were those that messed around in the wormhole with the Wu-Tang retake. We are now a dedicated PvP retake.